In this episode of Cosmic Sponge, Myrtle Beach UFO sightings break records. Cylon Raiders seen at Nags Head, North Carolina. West Virginia retired Marine spots chicken-eating Bigfoot. British UFO expert Nick Pope theorizes Russian aggression is a big turnoff for the Alien Federation. Theories of Everything podcast live streams an interview with George Knapp and Calm Kellner, discussing the scientific approach to the weirdness at the Skinwalker Ranch. And then for our main topic, we look into the history and evidence for the existence of giants. And finally, Stephen's suspicions reach a breaking point, leading him to question Jim's origins.
You claim to be from here. Where are you really?
State Park, Babcock.
It's Babcock.
Babcock.
Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we talk about UFOs and other weird wonders in the world. I'm Stephen Hawk.
And I'm Jimmy Coe.
Tonight, we have a very big topic to discuss with you folks. A large topic.
How big is it?
And giant. That's right. It is giants. We're going to be talking about giants. Giant humans, giant humanoids, the ancient giants. And do giants still exist? Did they ever exist? We're going to get into all that. But Jimmy, first, what have you been up to this week?
Planning for a vacation. I'm heading out west.
Out west?
Yeah. The wife and I are going to take a drive down Route 1, I think it is. It goes along the coast there. From
the Pacific Coast Highway.
Yeah, that. Yeah. Is that Route 1?
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't know what the route number is.
I
maybe
don't
it's
know.
1.
I don't know.
1 sounds good.
It's better than 2. So we're going to go down, start up north in Portland, and then drive all the way down to San Diego, have lunch with a friend, and then fly back. And while I was thinking about that, I was thinking back when I was a kid, and we always thought about being not a wealthy family, not necessarily poor, but not wealthy. We looked at all the what we considered the wealthy kids, and we were envious because they all went down to Myrtle Beach for their vacations.
Well, Myrtle Beach is like another county of West Virginia, I think, right? I mean, it's like everyone in southern West Virginia goes to Myrtle Beach for vacation. I mean, my wife's from the central part of the state, and they went to Myrtle Beach for vacation. I mean, I've been to Myrtle Beach like 25, 30 times probably.
Wow. I've been I've probably been 3 or 4 times, and went there for Thanksgiving one year. It was a lot of fun. Really weird, but fun.
It's fun. I like it. Okay. It's been quite a while since I've been there. We started for family vacations, and now that the kids are all grown and all that stuff, my wife and I have decided to do some other type of traveling and all that. But yeah, I like it down there. Deep sea fishing, all that stuff. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
You ever see any UFOs down there?
No, not that I remember.
So I came across this article on Myrtle Beach, and it has some of the per capita most sightings of any place in the country for UFOs.
Myrtle Beach has the most sightings of any place in the country.
One of the places.
Okay. I remember last week, if I'm not mistaken, when we did the top 20 countdown of the states. We remember all 50 states ranked by UFO sightings since 1974. I remember South Carolina, if I'm not mistaken, was number 20 on the list, so pretty high up there.
Yeah, but so maybe Myrtle Beach is the one place that is pushing the numbers up for South Carolina. So let's see what we have here. Horry County ranks number 1 in the country in UFO, unidentified flying objects, not necessarily vessels being driven by little green men, but sightings, according to 24/7 Tempo, which is a media news outlet. They cite the book UFO Sightings Desk Reference, United States of America, 2001 to 2020, which was published last May. A number of factors influencing the number of sightings include population, geography, climate, and weather. Reporting is facilitated by access to broadband and media reports that may create a feedback loop. High-profile incidents such as airline pilots report being buzzed by fast-moving objects are often followed by a rash of sightings. They averaged 254.1 sightings. I guess they got a really short guy there. 254.1 sightings per 100,000 residents, according to the media outlet.
Now, that's interesting, though, because that is a big tourist destination. So I wonder how that plays into it. I mean, one reason, as you had pointed out last week, that perhaps UFO sightings when people are outside a lot, which, I mean, you think about the beach, people want to take those long strolls down the beach. People are out enjoying the nightlife and that sort of thing, where normally maybe they would be at home watching TV or something. So there's a lot of people outside that maybe aren't normally outside people.
Yeah.
Maybe they're seeing the UFOs because there's so many more people out there. Also, on a more skeptical note, it could be people that aren't normally outside people, outdoorsy type people, to be out at night are seeing lights that are explainable, but they perceive them as being spacecraft from another world.
They also probably drinking a lot of hooch.
Yeah, that too. A common activity at Myrtle Beach.
For sure. So what do you got?
Oh, well, I've got a little bit of a segue. Long as we're talking about beach sightings, Nags Head, North Carolina, which actually is just right up the coast from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. There was an individual, a man, who was taking time-lapse images of the Milky Way, you know, where you set a camera and it snaps a picture maybe every second or something like that, and then play the movie in normal 30 frames per second or what have you. You know, you can see the stars moving across the sky, the clouds, you know, moving very quickly and all that. That's time-lapse photography. He seems to have captured some type of footage that looks like UFO activity off of North Carolina's Outer Banks. So the artist was an individual known as Wes Snyder, and he's well known in the Southeast for his coastal photography, particularly images taken at night. But even he is at a loss for words for what the rotating red trails may be. So when you look at the video, there are multiple times in his video, and it's right on the horizon, there appears to be something circling like these red trails. And, you know, we'll put this on our Facebook page so that listeners, you guys log in there and take a look at it. Pretty interesting. You know, it's hard to say what they are really, but there's these red circles of light. This is an individual that normally takes a lot of these type of photographs and has never, ever witnessed anything like that.
It's a cyclone.
In his work. Yeah. No, I mean, it's a clear, starry night, and then you see it leaves these red trails. Of course, again, it's time-lapse photography. You know, maybe UFOs, right? Or maybe it's some of those UFOs that just flew a little bit north from Myrtle Beach, and they're circling back to head back south.
Could be one of those Battlestar Galactic robots. You know, the little eye that goes back and forth, it's red. That's what it is.
Yeah. By your command.
By your command. Baltar.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that show. The old one.
The old one. Yeah, yeah. The new one was too depressing.
Yeah, so anyway, that's pretty intriguing. I mean, one thing I thought that the lights could have been, I was just throwing this out there because I don't know a whole lot about this, but yeah, I thought maybe a drone, possible, I guess. I haven't seen in the article, it's a very brief article, and I didn't see where anybody addressed what it could have possibly been, but who knows?
Yeah, could be a drone.
Maybe a visitor from another world.
It could be a temperature inversion.
Could be a weather balloon.
Could be a weather balloon.
May have been swamp gas.
Well, I don't like that red swamp gas. You need to go see a doctor.
Yeah.
You may have something wrong.
You got something wrong, buddy.
Yeah. So
what else you got, man?
Well, let's move away from the coast. A West Virginia couple claims to have had 3 encounters with Bigfoot, and they even photographed the creature.
Really?
Yeah, this happened down in your neck of the woods. Down in Denise. Do you know where that is?
You mean the red neck of the woods?
Yeah, the red neck of the woods. Yeah, down in that area.
Yeah.
This happened in Denise, which is northwest of Beckley, just near Bobcock. Babcock.
County. Come on, man.
No, well, I'm thinking this.
You claim to be from here. Where are you really?
The state park, Babcock.
It's Babcock.
Babcock. Get it at Babcock. So, according to the local news report, Billy Humphrey and his wife Sheena Easton made their discovery after he set up a deer hunting blind on their property in Denise, West Virginia. Humphrey, a former U.S. Marine, began his investigation after food that he put out to attract game had been devoured conspicuously fast on back-to-back nights. Everything was gone within hours, all of it, he said. I knew I had some raccoons, and we've got deer and bear, but whatever it was eating everything, and I was determined to find out what was going on.
Is that your former Marine from West Virginia?
It is.
Is that what they sound like?
Hey, I grew up with a lot of those tough boys, man. I wasn't one of them. They were the guys that were
I don't
usually...
think you did.
Those are the guys who usually beat me up.
You can't even say Babcock. So.
Babcock. So to sate his curiosity and perhaps bag whatever animal was eating all of his food, Humphrey spent parts of the next 2 nights in the blind. On his first night out there, he spotted something, but he could only make out its silhouette due to the light that was illuminated behind the creature. I thought it was a bear because it was tall enough that it cast a shadow when it passed in front of the light, but the light was 9 feet up, so whatever it was big. The next night, same thing happened. On the 3rd night, he enlisted the help of his wife, Sheena Easton. Okay, her last name really isn't Easton. It's probably Humphrey.
I did a double take on that one.
I said, let's just wait here till dark and see what happens. Well, we'd been sitting there for about 15 minutes when it came back. We looked out, and Sheena says calmly, there he is. I said, there who is? Bigfoot, she said. Sheena's calmness can be attributed to the fact that this wasn't the first time that she had encountered a Bigfoot. In fact, it was her 3rd. The first time I saw one, I was about 16 or 17 and riding in a car with my mother past Babcock State Park. And I looked to my left, and he was just standing there in the woods, plain as day, she explained. Billy Humphrey says that he was able to snap a quick photo with his phone, but did not have a better camera handy. Then he just turned and walked off. We heard him go through the laurel thicket, and then he made the sound like, have you ever heard a bear's death moan? He went like, whoa. Well, that's how he spelled it. Following the sighting... Let's stop. I can't read it with you laughing.
Come on, man. The bear death moan, that's the way he spelled it.
The
guy said,
no,
whatever.
He said, wow. It's WHOOOOOOOOOOO.
So it's really in the article.
AH. Yes. It's in the article. Okay. I'm reading the article, dude.
Okay.
Jeez. Following the sighting, Humphrey decided to steer clear of the blind for a month. Then he did finally return. He says the blind was torn apart, but not like a bear would tear it apart looking for food. Also, following their encounter, chickens started disappearing from the family farm, but not in the way one would think. I had 104 chickens, and then we realized we had 60. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. That was Sheena who said that.
Sheena's got a deep voice. No, so they had 140 chickens and then suddenly realized they only had 60.
Right.
It's like,
and there was no
you think we're shy on a few chickens around here?
Right.
It's like over half are missing.
Man, if half my chickens were missing, I'd know. And I don't have that.
What do you got, like 12 or something?
I've only got 12. I mean, you can easily get confused when you see 6 out and you think, it's fine. You know, the other 6 are probably, hanging out, drinking in the back. But Billy admitted that prior to the sighting, 100% he didn't believe in it, and then he thought that people who did were crazy. Now, however, he says, it was massive and about 8.5 feet, I guess. Sheena went and stood where he had been standing, and she's about 5'7". In the picture, he's actually standing so the lower half is over the hillside. So they recreated it with her standing where the creature was, and then they used that as a metric for deciding how tall it was. It had a cone head, and it was tan under the eyes and had a barrel chest. The original photo of Bigfoot you see in the Patterson-Gimli film, that's what it looked like.
Any other physical evidence? I mean, I doubt the article has any of this. I'd be curious about footprints. I mean, something that large is going to leave a ground impression, right?
You would think, and there's no other information here.
What's the first thing you would do? Okay, let's say you're into hunting. And you've set
I'm a
up your
Marine.
hunting.
I'm into hunting. I've killed in
Well,
combat.
let's just, I mean, you know some hunters. So if you're into hunting and you set up a blind, a deer blind or something like that, you had this sighting, you can't stay out there every night, all night. What would you do? If you thought there could be, and also your chickens are disappearing, what would you do?
I would put up a really good trail camera.
Exactly. A little surprised this individual maybe doesn't have the money for one or whatever. I mean, they're not terribly expensive, but he came back and his deer blind was all destroyed, and then his chickens are missing and things like that. I don't know, man. It'd be pretty creepy, especially if you were pretty sure it was something like a Bigfoot stalking around your property like that. That's amazing, though. You know, it's not very far from here that we had somebody that was pretty sure they heard the Bigfoot vocalizations. I mean, probably 20 miles from here. Of course, I don't know whether to know if that's truly what it was. Still, pretty exciting stuff. We got the foot up in the West Virginia, so hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
I got another article here. Do you remember who Nick Pope is?
Oh, yeah, he's the British UFO guy. He used to work for the Defense Ministry or something over in
That's right.
Great Britain, yeah.
Yeah, he worked for the Ministry of Defense in the UK, cataloged their UFO sightings and stuff, but he's become quite the ufologist in the private sector now. He made an appearance he I guess had an interview with the Daily Star, which is sort of a British tabloid newspaper. Now, I'm reading this on a website called Wion, W-I-O-N. So again, I have not read this article in particular. Just ran across this, on the internet looking for UFO news. According to this website, and then according to the Daily Star, ufologist Nick Pope has said that the Russian-Ukraine crisis is deterring aliens from making their presence known. So, of course, right now, if you're listening to this in the time stream, hopefully it's not right before the Russian-Ukraine war broke out. Yeah, Russia's been massing troops on the border of Ukraine, threatening them if they want to join NATO. Threatening an invasion, even though they say they're not, but they got like 100,000 troops on the border. They've flown in some airplanes in nearby countries like Belarus and things like that, and it looks like preparation for an invasion. So hopefully, if you're listening to this in the future, that never happened. But anyway, Nick Pope is concerned because he says during the interview with the British tabloid newspaper, the Daily Star, Pope said highly evolved extraterrestrials probably regard warfare as something that only primitive civilizations engage in. The Ukraine situation means we're unlikely to get an invitation to join the Galactic Federation for the time being. Aliens might wonder at the wisdom of the UK going up against Russia, but would probably realize that being in a coalition helps, he added. I guess Nick Pope is concerned that if war breaks out, that the aliens will just turn up their noses and say, we're not letting them in the club because they're still a bunch of warring primitives.
I mean, first you're assuming that you know what aliens think. I mean,
exactly.
That's a stretch. And then, I mean, I could say that it's more likely that they won't let us join because of the Twilight movies. And
my wife loves those movies, man.
Well, don't tell her I said that, then.
She listens to the podcast. You just did.
Oh, daggone it. Cut that piece out. I don't want that Italian craziness to come over and beat me up.
That's right, man. You better be careful.
That's right. So let me pick some other sparkly vampire movie as an example.
Well, you better not say The Hunger Games because...
She likes that too?
Oh, yeah. The books as well. So be careful.
I was going to say Dark Shadows.
Don't say that. We both like Dark Shadows.
Well, yeah, I saw the...
You may as well just come up with some completely different reason.
Well, sure, we could do that. We don't know what aliens think. And, I doubt that they're really worried about mankind if they've traveled the vastness of space and survived all of its hazards, including, whatever garbage food they have to eat on the way over. By the time they get here, they're not at all concerned with our simpleton ways.
Right. I mean, I totally agree that how can you even assume to know if we are having visitation from extraterrestrials, right now, but they've chosen not to reveal themselves to us at large for whatever reason. I think that it's to try and make assumptions without knowing the true nature of UFOs or their occupants. Of course, a lot of people in ufology have built these encyclopedias of knowledge, just based on very thin evidence and supposition. I don't know.
Or they've just made it up, in their spare time.
Or just made it up, yeah. I mean, basing it on a lot of very cryptic messages that are received from so-called contactees or experiencers or whatever, and trying to piece all that together.
Yeah. People with concussions or, whatever.
Drug habits. No, I mean, really. I mean, I think there's something to the UFO phenomenon. I don't think any of us, at least what I've read and seen, I don't think anyone's any closer to solving that riddle than we were 70 years ago.
And so, on to my last story, really is just a mention of Theories of Everything is a YouTube channel where Kurt J, I'm not going to try to say his last name, I always pronounce it Jumanji just because it looks sort of like that to me. Kurt Jumanji, and I apologize, Kurt, because I can barely say my last name. He interviews George Knapp, and he also interviewed the co-author of this book on skinwalkers at the Pentagon.
Oh, the book you talked about last week.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. And so he had an interview with
George
him today.
Knapp, the one that brought us Bob Lazar.
Right, George Knapp, and also Colin.
Is he Australian?
Colm A. Keller. I think he's Irish because he's got an Irish accent, but he could be Australian.
Well, never mind. When you said Colin, I just assumed he was Australian.
No, it's not. It's Colm. C-O-L-M. And I spelled something. You caught me. Keller. He's a PhD biochemist, I believe. He has a pretty impressive employment history. He worked on Skinwalker Ranch under, I think, Bigelow, when Bigelow owned it, doing scientific research. And this is a book that came out of that, and the interview is really good with George Knapp and Colm on there. I highly recommend it, and it's those kind of interviews with people who are credentialed scientists. You've got Avi Loeb. You've got a lot of credentialed scientists who are looking at the evidence or the information provided and saying, there's an interesting mystery here, enough so I'm willing to pursue it, spend time in my life pursuing these questions. And it's those kinds of interviews that make me pause and say, there actually might be something to this. Still might be nothing, but at least enough for these folks to pursue it.
Part of the reason that we're doing this podcast, I've always been interested in a lot of especially UFOs, but also some of the cryptids. There's so many sightings, so many similarities of sightings. Some of the stuff I know is bandwagon, like somebody's heard about it or someone said there was a UFO sighted. But then there's so many just really strange encounters, so many strange phenomena. I mean, we have physical evidence where something landed on the ground, and to say that that's a hoax when there's a big circle burned in someone's yard, to constantly say it's something else or that's a hoax, or you see the leaves all wilted in a tree where flying saucer came down, to constantly ignore that kind of evidence, it's just really and I think it's inconvenient. If you're a scientist and you think this is the way the world works, you ignore that stuff because it just does not fit into your worldview. You don't know how to deal with that, right? These strange physical traces that are left. But me personally, sometimes I feel that all the conspiracy threads and everything is maybe things have gone a little too far, made too many assumptions about the gray aliens and all the other things that go along with this phenomenon. But then on the other hand, you and I really have just started this podcast and just started scratching the surface of looking at this, hopefully from sort of an objective point of view. And the more I study the stories and we dig into these cases, the more I'm convinced there really is something to the UFO phenomena. There's something about it. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's aliens from another planet. I don't know if it's extra dimensional, time travelers. I mean, who knows? I have no idea, and I really don't think anyone else does either. It's just our assumption that they're an advanced civilization from another world.
Yeah, ditto.
How thoughtful. All right, so that is tonight's news.
That was stupid.
So we're going to move on to tonight's main topic. And as I said at the head of the show, this is a really big one. It is giants. But before we get into that, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It helps other people find the show. Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Please visit our webpage. It is cosmicsponge.com. There you can find a little coffee cup icon in the top right-hand corner. It's called Buy Me a Coffee. That way you can help support the show, and Jimmy and I can keep on doing what we love to do every week. Contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com, and we'd love to hear from you for any reason, especially if you have a story you would like for us to share on the show. But if you just want to email us and say howdy, or that's okay too. Or just want to email us and say hello, that would be great. So on to tonight's show.
Say howdy if you're from the South, and hello if you're a carpetbagger.
I don't know, man. Whatever. Wow, I'm having a hard time getting through things tonight here. We're going to be talking about giants. So obviously it means giant humanoids or what have you. First of all, let me just say this. We are approaching the subject of giants in a very secular way. We're just looking at, the stories and stuff. So we don't want to, offend anybody's religious beliefs or anything like that, because certainly giants are mentioned in Christian Bible and the Quran and some other religious texts. So we're not trying to step on anyone's toes. We're just looking at this purely as an academic subject.
Throughout the ancient world. Why you got to laugh at my stuff, man?
It's your dramatic voice. I'm going to have to put some dun 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 on the back of it.
Throughout the ancient world, giants moved among humans, or so legends say. Often considered an entirely different race, they were depicted as being at odds with humans and gods alike. Consider the earliest written story from the ancient world. The Epic of Gilgamesh contains a giant. In the story, two friends, Gilgamesh and Enkidu, go together to fight the evil Humbaba at the Cedar Mountains. The evil giant's face was like a lion, a roar like a flood, a mouth of flames, breath that burns trees, and teeth like dragons. In the end, they cut his head off. There is even the Book of Giants.
Oh, man, you ruined it.
Spoiler alert. There is even the Book of Giants, dating to around 300 BC, that expands on the Nephilim, known as the sons of the divine, originally mentioned in the book of Genesis. It, along with the book of Enoch, alludes to the sexual intermingling of human females with fallen angels. The resultant offspring were the giants who oppressed humanity and taught evil. Because of the wickedness which had come upon mankind, God decided to kill them all with a great flood. We are told that Enoch tried to intercede with heaven on behalf of these wicked angels, but was unsuccessful. And who could forget the terrifying Philistine, Goliath, a giant with a soft spot in his head? Legends persisted throughout history into the modern era. In 1833, some soldiers digging a pit at Lompoc Ranchero, California, unearthed a 12-foot giant with a double row of chompers, both upper and lowers. Initially unique until another dental monstrosity was found on Santa Rosa Island off the California coast. According to Paiute oral history, the Si-Te-Cah, or Si-A, are a legendary tribe of red-haired cannibalistic giants, the remains of which were allegedly found in 1911 by guano miners in Nevada's Lovelock Cave. While searching a cave near the Great Canyon of Baranac de Cobre in northern Mexico in the early 1930s, explorer Paxton Hayes came across 34 mummified blonde giants measuring up to 8 feet tall. Giants are everywhere in history. Ireland has Balor, the god of death. Norse mythology has Hrungnir. France and Spain have Gentil. The Greeks have Polyphemus. Japan, the Oni. Brits, Gog Magog. That's old man Gog Magog's boy. India, Kumbhakarna. China has Yao Ming, the basketball player. And everyone west of China starting... Stop. I can't concentrate. China has Yao Ming. I can't do it now. I got to put my hand over your face. Stop. I don't think I can do it.
I ruined your spiel, man.
I was doing so good. As long as you don't laugh, I'll be fine, okay?
I'm not laughing.
Okay.
I'll look away.
Don't even look at me. China has Yao Ming, the basketball player, and everyone west of China, starting with the countries that end in Stan. Then you're going to have to edit around this. Then the Arabian giant Pliny. Australia has Baloo, Jungans, and Google Eyes. I get it. That's how they're spelled. Okay. I'm just going to skip the Australian ones because I can't go through that again. And then, of course, my favorite giant, pro wrestlers, Andre the Giant. Okay. The list goes on and on. Tonight, we're going to try to get to the bottom of giants, fact or fiction, starting with how big do you have to be in order to be considered a giant? Steve?
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so yeah, let's look at giants. I think a lot of times when we think about giants, we of course think of Jack the Giant Killer or Jack and the Beanstalk. Fairy tale giants are what, 50 feet tall? I mean, gigantic giants. Mm-hmm. But I think when we look at the more, say, the biblical definition of giants, and they're usually just really big people, right? For instance, let's look at David and Goliath. Goliath probably is the most famous giant as far as ancient times or biblical times, or what we think about in Western civilization. So when we look at the writings of first century Jewish historian Flavius Josephus and the 1st and 2nd century Dead Sea Scrolls, both give Goliath's height as 4 cubits and a span. What that is about 7 feet 9. So it's 2.32 meters for all of our European and other parts of the world listeners.
That's 6 feet 7 inches. 4 cubics and a span. I'm pretty sure that's...
Well, 2 meters, yeah, would be about 6 feet. You know what? Yeah, this is way off because it says, this is a big misprint on this. I'm glad you said that because approximately 2.32 meters would be about 6 1/3, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in ancient times, of course, that would have been a very large person. We see, obviously, larger people than basketball players and such. But now the King James Version of the Bible says the giant Goliath was 6 cubits and a span in height. So that'd be about 3.43 meters. So more like 9.5 feet tall, right?
9 feet,
Something
9 inches.
Like
Yep.
We do have a little bit of discrepancy there. But if we look at Josephus, let's say, or the Dead Sea Scroll translations, I mean, that's a large human, right? That's like an NBA player. I remember hearing once, it's only been within the past couple of years, I heard that if you know someone that's over 7 feet tall, there's a 23% chance, almost a 0.25% chance that they either play for the NBA or have played in the NBA. That's how rare it is even today.
Wow.
So when we look at David and Goliath, the average height of people were much smaller back then. So that was what a giant was. So we have sort of that giant. And then, of course, so really we're talking about people that's maybe 10 feet tall, 8 feet tall, something like that, when you get outside of fairy tales and mythology and that sort of thing. So I think, would you say that's a pretty safe description of giants in antiquity?
Realistic giants, yes.
And then, of course, a lot of times what we're looking at, and I'm sure the condition existed back in ancient times as well and all through history, is giantism. The pituitary gland doesn't function normally, and some people can grow to be very tall. Robert Wadlow, he was 8 feet 11 inches tall. He's the tallest man of whom there's irrefutable evidence. This was what was said in 1940. Sultan Kosin, in 2020, is a Turkish farmer, is still alive. Record for the tallest living male is 8 foot 2 inches tall. But Robert Wadlow was 8 feet 11, almost 9 feet tall. I mean, he literally dwarfs a normal-sized man beside him. But he died relatively young. But human bodies are just not designed to grow that tall. The skeletal structures have problems and so forth. They have other health issues as well. When he was born, he weighed 8.7 pounds, which is a big baby, still within the realm of average people. Then by the time he was 5 years old, he was 5'4" tall. In other words, he was tall as Jimmy.
I'm taller than that.
At 5 years old, he was 5'4" tall.
I would be taller than him.
At age 8, he grew taller than his father, who was 5'11", which is
he'd be taller than me at 11.
He towered over his 4 younger siblings. When most children were still carried by their parents, Robert was able to lift his father up the stairs of the family home. He had some serious medical issues, of course. And as he got older and taller, they just compounded his situation. I mean, it's amazing to see how tall this man was. Just to look at pictures of him, I mean, trying to get in a normal automobile. I mean, it looks like a child's car. He was so huge. But, of course, he was a big celebrity in his time. He died at 22 years old.
Right, which is really young.
Of course, this was 1940, not a lot of great antibiotics around, but he had to wear a brace on his right ankle and ended up getting a septic blister on it, and the infection killed him.
So I think what we can surmise by that is we can at least we are absolutely sure that humans throughout history had the potential to reach approximately 9 feet tall. So it's possible. We have living proof of human beings that are as tall as 9 feet tall. So now let's jump from 9 feet tall and go up into something 12 feet or taller. And do we have any evidence of giants larger than 12 feet?
As far as I know, there's no physical evidence of it, anything legitimate. I know there've been some things through the years, particularly in the 19th century. There were a couple of well-known hoaxes of giants.
I got a giant here that's 180 feet tall. I'm not kidding. It's you can go see it. It's in Si-Te-Cah Giant. It's a hill figure near Cerne, and I guess I'm pronouncing it correctly, Si-Te-Cah in Dorset, England. 55 meters, 180 feet tall, depicts a standing nude male with a prominent erection and wielding a large club in its right hand. And like many other hill figures, is outlined by shallow trenches cut in the turf and backfilled with chalk rubble.
Right, I've seen that, but that's just an image. I mean, that's not a real, like, archaeological evidence.
Well, you don't think he was, like, standing off to the side and the guy was holding up his thumb to his eye there and then digging the trenches? I mean, it could happen.
Yeah. Well, now there is, I did run across this. There is the giant, it's fossil evidence of the giant of Castelnau. I think it would be how you pronounce that. Mm-hmm. This was discovered in France, and they estimated this individual was 11 feet 6 inches tall, or 3.5 meters tall, discovered by a French anthropologist.
Yeah, that's over 11 feet tall, so that would be taller than our tallest person. So we're getting up that 12-foot range.
There were, in 1894, press accounts mentioned of a discovery of bones of human giants unearthed at a prehistoric cemetery in Montpellier, France, that were very large. And they said they were alongside other bones of gigantic proportions, which indicated they belonged to a race of men between 10 and 15 feet in height. The bones were reportedly sent to the Paris Academy for further study, but nobody seems to be able to locate those now. The legendary tribe of red-haired cannibalistic giants you'd mentioned earlier by the guano miners in Nevada. Mm-hmm. The size and nature of the fossil remains have been disputed. What else do you know about that particular case in Si-Te-Cah?
That there's no real evidence of those bodies anywhere. There is a story out of Ecuador. It's the home to many strange findings. One of the most popular recent discoveries is the so-called Lost City of Giants, which was found by a group of explorers in the Ecuadorian jungle. In addition to the mysterious city, in the past people have found skeletons of immense size. In the southern parts of Ecuador, near the border with Peru, people found all sorts of strange things. And according to reports, experts have recovered bones and skeletons which are similar to humans, only much larger in size. Many of these skeletons and bones remain hidden from public in private collections around the globe. One of the most famous guardians of giant skeletons is believed to have been Father Carlos Miguel Vaca, who guarded until his death in 1999 several bones and fragments unearthed from a site called Changamanias in Ecuador. And translated, it means God's cemetery. He has a picture here of a huge skeleton. It looks to be 7 meters tall. It is a representation of an extrapolation, I guess, from the bones that they already had looted. But no one knows where this thing is. And there's a conspiracy theory that the Smithsonian has collected all of the evidence and has destroyed it or hidden it away from the world because we're just not ready for it yet.
Right. I've heard some stuff like that. So let's get into a couple of the hoaxes. I know in the 1800s there was one real big one. Do you have anything on that one?
I don't know which one you're talking about. There's several.
The Cardiff Giant?
No, I don't have anything on that. You'll have to... it sounds familiar, but I mean, I was looking for real evidence of giants, and I found some that made me go, that's pretty freaking cool.
I tried to find out if there were any kind of modern giant sightings. I couldn't find anything. But on the other hand, we could be talking about Bigfoot, right? Bigfoot, in a way, could be considered a giant. So whenever I hear some of these tales of giant wild men, for instance, from New Zealand, when we talked about that in our New Zealand episode, you hear about that all over the world, the hairy giant wild men in different languages and so forth. And to me, that translates to Bigfoot. I mean, because Bigfoot typically is like 8 or 9 feet tall. Some people say like 10 feet tall, very big, very hairy. Could these giants even have been in ancient times, some of the giant writings, could it have been big feet, or Bigfoots? I still haven't really decided.
Bigfoot.
On that one.
Singular
Bigfoots.
and plural. Bigfoot.
What do you think?
Bigfoot.
No, I mean, what do you think about the possibility that they didn't, some of the ancient sightings or things like that could have been Bigfoots?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's as reasonable as anything else we talk about on here.
Well, I guess so, yeah. So anyway, there was the Cardiff Giant. Was one of the most famous hoaxes in American history. It was a 10-foot tall, purported petrified man uncovered on October 16th, 1869, by workers digging a well behind the barn of William C. Stubb Newell in Cardiff, New York. Both it and an unauthorized copy made by P.T. Barnum are still being displayed. The original is currently on display at the Farmers Museum in Cooperstown, New York. The giant was the creation of a New York tobacconist named George Hull. Hull was an atheist and decided to create the giant after an argument at a Methodist revival meeting about Genesis 6:4, which states that there were giants who once lived on earth. Hull hired men to quarry out a 10-foot by 4.5-inch long block of gypsum in Fort Dodge, Iowa, telling them it was intended for a monument to Abraham Lincoln in New York. He shipped the block to Chicago, where he hired Edward Buchart, a German stonecutter, to carve it into the likeness of a man and swore him to secrecy. Various stains and accents were used to make the giant to appear to be old and weathered, and the giant's surface was beaten with steel knitting needles embedded in a board to simulate pores. During November 1868, Hull transported the giant by railroad to the farm of his cousin, William Newell. By that time, he had spent $2,600, which in today's dollars is about $51,000. And then about a year later, Newell hired Gideon Emmons and Henry Nichols to dig a well. They uncovered the giant. He asked them to dig a well here, right? So they weren't in on it. And they uncovered the giant. He said, one of the men reportedly exclaimed, "I declare, some old Indian has been buried here." And so anyway, he set up a tent and he charged 25 cents for people to come and look at it, which is worth about $5 today, I think. 2 days later, he doubled the admission price. People came from everywhere to get a look at the giant. Of course, all the experts that saw it, just immediately, the archaeological scholars said this is a fake. Geologists noticed that it's no good reason to try and dig a well where he was digging the well. When a geologist looked at the gypsum, he's like, there's no way this could have existed for hundreds of years under the ground because it would have just deteriorated, right? And wet in the earth. So anyway, but he made a lot of money on this thing. Yeah, he's actually sold it to someone for like $23,000, which is worth about almost $500,000 today.
So did you see all of these giant footprints in hard granite around the world?
No.
In these remote locations, there are, and I tell you, it looks like a footprint in hard stone, hard rock. In this one case, it is in granite. And the size of whatever made that would be in that giant range of like 42 feet tall, something like that, like a dinosaur size.
Oh, like Jack the Giant Killer giant.
Yeah, like that. Let me post it here in the channel. And,
Okay.
There's a link. And there are these all over the world. There are various sized giant feet. Some of them perhaps carved, but others look like somebody stepped in the large mud. And maybe it was a dinosaur stepped in the mud and just the smearing made it look like toes.
They really look like human footprints, giant human footprints.
Yeah, and this particular one is, I think they call it the footprint of God or something like that. It's in this really remote location in Africa, but they're all over the place. So, I mean, that made me go, well, that's pretty cool. Maybe somebody's got extracurricular activities of going around and carving feet into granite around the world in remote locations. Or perhaps some large creature did step into it, and it gives the impression that it's a human footprint when, in fact, it's probably just some type of dinosaur.
Yeah, they're very interesting. It's like there's a, and I don't know, I'm sure it's famous, and probably listeners have heard of this, but I know there's a footprint. It looks like a booted footprint that has squashed a trilobite, right? Trilobites were creatures. They were very successful species of creatures that lived way before the dinosaurs. I mean, they were around like 350 million years ago, long before dinosaurs, long before humans. There's a fossilized footprint in a sense that looks like one has been stepped on, like with somebody wearing shoes or boots or something, right? And I'd heard about this for a long time, and then when I finally saw it, I kind of looked at it and I'm like, yeah, I can see where you think that, but I mean, it's not definitive. It doesn't say like Granger on the bottom of the boot or anything. It's not definitive. It's like I can see where you interpret that way, and you can see that, but then I can also see that it could just be something else, So it's difficult to say. But yeah, those giant footprints, those ancient ones, are something to think about. Very weird.
So while I was doing research on this, I found some suggestions from archaeologists and scientists, geologists, medical professionals, that kind of thing, that gave some suggestions as to why more primitive man or earlier man may have come to the conclusion that giants existed. One that I found was really interesting and maybe related to mound builders in the North America continent. And mound builders are prominent in Ohio and Kentucky, West Virginia, for example. When they dug up these bones, the bones were laid out in such a way that the ligaments and the tissue parts had disintegrated, and the bones were scattered, making them appear larger than what they would otherwise.
Like when they opened it up, that they spread out like maybe several inches in between.
Exactly.
Each one of the leg bones or whatever. I got you.
And gave it an exaggerated sense of size. So that's one thing. But if we go back to the ancient world and we see that there are stoneworks that primitive people, quote unquote primitive people, achieved through lost technology, it gives the impression that in order to move these large granite blocks, large stone blocks, like Stonehenge, for example, it would require a large human being or some large creature to actually lift and move those and put them into place. So that's another example of them attributing those large megalithic sites to giants creating them.
And not just megalithic sites. In the Middle Ages, people didn't have a good sense that the Roman Empire even existed. And so it was a commonly held belief that all of the ancient Roman ruins, because all the knowledge of how those were built was lost, and people believed that it was an ancient race of giants who weren't around anymore that built these huge structures. Now, this obviously not the people that were learned, whatever passed for academia in the Middle Ages, but like the common people that didn't have any education whatsoever, it was a commonly held belief that the giants had built, these ancient Roman ruins and things like that, because they couldn't imagine how their village could possibly build something like that.
Yeah, and the other thing that they surmise is that there are some cases where people had dug up bones of megafauna and attributed those to actual giants, mistaking the bones for, a humanoid when in fact it was a mammoth or some other large megafauna.
Right. Have you ever seen, I think it's either a mastodon or maybe a mammoth skull. I think it's a mastodon. But I know on the island of Crete that they're common. It's sort of like when the face isn't there and all the soft tissue isn't there, it looks like one giant eye hole in this giant skull that really could be perceived as a humanoid, right? So think of ancient man digging up some of these giant bones. Have no clue what a dinosaur is, or, it rained last night and it had covered half of these things, or you're plowing your field and a giant dinosaur bone comes out. I mean, you're trying to imagine what this goes to. Those skulls from Mastodon, I believe it was Mastodon for some reason.
Yep.
And it literally looks like a single giant eye hole in the middle of that skull. Scientists today think that's probably where the legend of the Cyclops came from, because it looks like one big central eye. And if that skull was on a humanoid creature, it would be giant. But the thing is, we have to look at, I think, when we look at stories of giants and the possibility of exist, we know the human form can grow up to 11, at least almost 12 feet, right? We know that a living man was at that height, but he also died at 22 years old because it's extremely hard, giantism. Same thing with Andre the Giant, the wrestler and actor. He died relatively young as well. And, giantism, which is this condition that causes that, is very hard on the human body. The human bone structure and things isn't designed to carry the weight of actually being that large. It's bodies have evolved on the planet in order to live under air gravity and be of average height. And when you go beyond that, the bone structure is just not designed to hold that. That's always been the argument about something like King Kong, or like there's no way an ape could be that gigantic because the bone structure wouldn't hold it. It would collapse just because of the way that skeleton is designed. It's designed to be much smaller and function.
Mm-hmm.
You have to take those things into consideration. But I think when we hear stories of giants and things like that, most certainly could have been all those things, could have been maybe in when they say a race of giants, could have been villages or towns. That obviously genetics can play a large part into those sort of things. And if that type of gene caught on, or just being tall caught on because the little villages all intermarry, so the gene pool is very small. So, I could see like a community or an island or something you go to that have people that are taller than average because, that particular gene just became dominant in that population. I mean, it's certainly plausible.
Wonder if that's where basketball was created, on that island with those tall people.
Yeah, I don't know. I want to talk about one more hoax before we get out of here. Do you have anything else on?
Yeah, I want to talk about my favorite giant.
Okay.
In my research, and it is my favorite giant is Gog Magog. I love the name, first of all, Gog Magog, and they believe it may come from. There's two sources it may have come from. One is on the Celtic side, Celtic lore, and the other is biblical lore. People in the New Testament thought that Gog and Magog were two people, two giants. But the Old Testament has Gog Magog in there, and it is one person and the other is a people. So maybe a leader and some people or something like that. Either way, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the giant of Great Britain. And it was actually Britannia, Albion in those days. So Gog Magog is said to have been the last giant in the British Isles. The source for most of the information comes from Geoffrey of Monmouth, who in 1136 wrote The History of the Kings of Britain, in which he described how early Britain was inhabited by a race of giants. One such giant was the 12-foot-tall Gog Magog, a rough and strong being who could uproot an oak tree as if it were a twig. One day, a group of giants, including Gog Magog, attacked Brutus, a descendant of the Trojans of Greece who had claimed Albion as his own. The giants killed many Britons before they too were killed, and only Gog Magog survived. Brutus took Gog Magog to his second-in-command, Quirinius, the founder of Cornwall, who was a mean giant wrestler. The two began to wrestle, and Gog Magog used his brute strength to crush 3 of Quirinius' ribs. Quirinius was so enraged by the injury that he quickly picked up the giant, ran with him up the hill, finally throwing him off to his death from a cliff. And thus it is said, ridding Britain of the last giant. Can you imagine the dude picking up a giant and running him up a hill and tossing him off?
Pretty strong dude.
Yeah, Quirinius.
I've got one last thing I want to talk about. There was a photograph that started making the rounds on the internet. When you see the photograph, is 2 people excavating a giant skeleton. Now, it's obviously an archaeological site because, I mean, it has all the markers out. You see one worker in the pit with a shovel. You see another individual leaning over, looking into the dig where they have it all boarded off. The only problem is that what they're digging up is a gigantic skeleton, human skeleton. Just to give you an idea, I would say that the head of the man digging the skeleton up would probably fit in the eye socket of this giant skeleton, okay? So, I mean, very large. He's not even as tall as the bone that goes from your elbow to your shoulder. What's that bone called, Jimmy? Do you know?
The shoulder bone.
Well, anyway.
The upper arm bone.
Okay, the upper arm bone. Let's just call it that then. Well, anyway, whatever that upper arm bone is, this individual would not be as tall as that. So just to give you some scale of how large this is, it looks brilliant, right? So around 2004, this photograph started circulating the internet, and it started popping up everywhere where people were saying that archaeologists had found this giant discovery. This giant skeleton was unearthed. I mean, this message went everywhere. Portugal, India, El Salvador, Malaysia, Africa, Dominican Republic, Greece, Egypt, South Africa, Kenya. And then, of course, this story starts spreading on the internet because just as we had pointed out in our Singularities episode, that outrageous stories get spread like wildfire now, just because of the way we communicate and the way we spread information and disinformation. And, of course, when you have something like this, something that when you look at it from a religious context, they want to prove that giants existed on the earth. So they get very excited about this, and then they claim that National Geographic Society suppressed this photo and are suppressing all this. Like Jimmy was talking about, the Smithsonian apparently is suppressing the conspiracy theory that they're suppressing this archaeological evidence that giants once existed on the earth for whatever reason. But this story has been all over the world. And then, of course, if you're a believer in those things, you're going to pass this around too and say, oh, look at this, they really found giants. Or you're the type of person that wants to perpetuate a story to see how far around the world it goes. We have that too. But this actually, if you run across this thing, and you'll see it from time to time, and it looks beautiful. But what the photograph actually is there was an individual who created this in 2004 or 2002. It was a contest they were having on a web page just to do like a Photoshop thing. And what he did, which this article from National Geographic tracked down the author of the photograph, and he says what he did was he took the photograph of a mastodon excavation and then found where a skeleton had been dug up and just collaged the images, right? And so but it looks great. I mean, if you saw it, if it was something else there that could be possible, there's no reason you wouldn't believe it. I mean, it looks so legit. In this article, they also post the original dig site and show those scientists, those working on the actual mastodon site. So they show you the real photograph, and then they also show the real photograph of where the human skeleton was taken from, which is legitimate. So, and there are others. There's other ones where they showed this similar things that have been photoshopped and whatever. But that's the modern. Wait. Cardiff Giant, right? I mean, just erect a tent and charge $0.25 for everybody to come by and see it.
Are you saying, Stephen, that don't believe everything you read on the internet. Is that
Right.
Is that the takeaway here?
And I mean, I get it. I mean, think about people that are in the UFO community, Bigfoot community, and that sort of thing. And I mean, in a sense, we are too, right? We've made friends since we started doing this podcast that go on Bigfoot hunts and all the other things. And I mean, in us doing this podcast, it's sort of like you want to see a UFO, right? I mean, now, especially more so than ever now that we're doing this, it's like, yeah, I want to see a ghost. Or, well, I don't want to see a ghost. You might want to see a ghost. I don't want to see a ghost. I would like to see a UFO, and I'd love to see Bigfoot. Not just a blurry image. I'm talking about full-blown, he's dragging me to his camp kind of thing. It'd be great. Well, maybe not that part. But anyway, I would love to have an up-close and personal sighting of something. So I think people in this community and the UFOs, cryptids, and whatever, I mean, we're just as guilty. It'll be a blurry photograph or whatever, and just pass it around and say, I think it looks like a lander or what have you, or we'll embrace things that are obviously hoaxed photographs because we want it to be real, right? This is no worse than that. I mean, think about it. I mean, there's photographs that I know are fake, and it's so obvious. The one is that guy from Switzerland that has a UFO called
Billy Meyer. Yeah, that's his name.
I've actually seen films of how he produced some of them, and he's really, really good at it, and he has a really large model. But if you look at it very carefully, it's a trash can lid, and his ex-wife tells you it's a trash can lid. And once you see that, you can look up the brand of trash can lid, and it fits perfect. If you ever watched The X-Files, and in Mulder's office, there was a big poster there that said, I want to believe, and that UFO is the one I'm talking about. That is a known fake. And if you look at it very carefully, it's an obvious hoax. But many people in the UFO world and believers, they want to believe it's true, despite evidence to the contrary.
Yeah, it would take an extraordinary amount of evidence for me to believe. I'm so dependent on physical, repeatable evidence.
And I mean, I'm a lot like that too. I mean, I think there's something strange to many of the things we talk about on this show. And obviously, giants is kind of a sideline, right? Just something Jimmy suggested one day. Let's look at some of that. And again, I think a lot of what people would have called giants 200 years ago, 300 or 400 years ago, giant wild men could very well be something like Bigfoot. That's about all I got on the subject of giants. Jimmy, you got anything else?
I'm going to look here real quick to see if I have anything else really about giants. One side thing that I learned, the oldest proof of how old the Bible goes back, I think it was 2,700 years, something like that, is a fragment of Leviticus, and it remains unchanged from the Dead Sea Scroll period. So I always grew up thinking the Dead Sea Scrolls was the earliest written account that we had recovered from antiquity, and it's not. There's older pieces of the Bible in other forms, and they just unraveled digitally, virtually, a scroll that was too fragile to undo, and they did these.
I saw that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, I think the Dead Sea Scrolls, what made them such a fantastic archaeological find was the completeness of them. Mm-hmm. There's a copper scroll. They are almost all religious texts, versions of the Bible. I think it's believed that there was sort of a commune or a colony of a Jewish religious sect of men,
right,
who lived in this compound and did all that work, and then they believed that maybe the Romans, I believe, if I'm remembering it correctly. Mm-hmm. It's been a while since I've read anything about it, but we're an invading authority like that was in that area, so they suspect that they hid their work so that it wouldn't be taken or destroyed or whatever, and that's what we find now in all those caves of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I mean, it's just, I think, again, the amazing part of it is the completeness of so much stuff. I mean, it's not the oldest source, no.
Right.
And if you think about it, I mean, they didn't have printing presses or anything. So if you wanted your copy of the Bible, I mean, you had to handwrite it. I mean, it's like, okay, hey, man, I'd love to have a copy of that. And it's like, hey, I'll make one for you, man. Come back in about 24 months. I should have it done by then.
Wow, that's writing fast.
Yeah, really. I mean, that's the only way those things were were shared.
And if it didn't change from 2,700 years to 300 years to modern day, people took great care to make sure the accuracy was maintained between those. Pretty incredible.
Well, all right, man. I think we'll just wrap it up here. You got anything else on the Giants?
Nothing else on the Giants.
Not the New York Giants. When I first put in Giants, that's all I found was like New York Giants websites. Yeah. And I was like, how about just Giant when I did my web search? That worked better. I was hoping to find some kind of modern sighting or, sightings that were more recent of giants, but apparently not.
Like living giants running around in the fields or something?
Yeah, I thought, because you brought it up as, the possibility of ancient race of giants and all that, and the legends that we all have. I thought, well, you never know. I never knew until kind of recently that people still have sightings of the extinct ground sloth in this country and in South America from time to time. Isn't that strange?
Yeah, that guy who has the show on one of those Discovery History or something that goes out and looks for cryptids and finds them? Mm-hmm. And he's found like 3 or 4 of them. His show goes out and they follow up on rumors about various cryptids, and they've located several of them. And he believes the ground sloth might exist.
They're still around.
Yeah, in a region of Peru, like a really remote region. It's in a bowl, essentially, with a lot of mountain ranges surrounding it. And there's been sightings there as recently as like the 1980s or 1990s of the native people there having run into one. And they describe it, and it sounds like...
Yeah, I think we talked about that on another episode, didn't we?
We did.
I think when we were doing the thylacine or something.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, all right, man. Before we get out of here, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. And also, I'm going to ask you to do us a favor. Tell a friend, tell a cousin, tell some other people to listen to the show. That word of mouth spreading about the show is probably our best advertisement we could get out there. Check out our webpage, cosmicsponge.com. We have a web store on there, and also there's a little coffee cup icon on the top right-hand corner of the page. If you click on that, you can donate to the show, and it helps me and Jimmy keep this thing going, because as much as we love to do it, it is not free to produce. So please help us out if you like what you hear. We're also on Instagram, Facebook. Many of the news stories and stuff we talk about on the shows, we'll post more information on Facebook, so be sure and check that out. And also, we are now on YouTube. So however you like to listen, we appreciate it, and we appreciate everyone tuning in every week. The show does keep growing, and thank you to all that are tuning in and downloading some of the older episodes and everything. If you want to reach out to us with a comment, or if you have a story to tell that you'd like us to share on the air, our contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Jimmy, did I leave anything out?
No, you were, as always, spot on.
All right, then. With all that being said, this is Stephen Hawk signing out, and I'll see you next week.
Jimmy Coe, keep your eyes to the skies and your feet on the ground. Catch you next week. Why you laugh at me?
You really should check out that Cardiff Giant. That's not all that's giant. It is anatomically correct.
Correct? Wow. What did they use for the,
I'll be afraid to say.
Erected part.
I can just imagine him talking to the author. Make it bigger.
Make it bigger. It's a bigger giant. It's a big giant.
Yeah, all the people that kept coming to see it in the tent, it's overwhelmingly women, but I don't know why.
Come on, man. Did they have like a napkin or something draped over it?
Not the picture I saw.
A tablecloth. Oh, it was like they actually showed the whole thing, huh?
Yeah, check it out.
Cardiff, you say. Cardiff. Giant picture. There we go. And then I'll give you my honest opinion about it. Cardiff. Holy moly. That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account, firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.